Hello and welcome to lesson 10 of this basic biblical Greek course. And today we are looking at demonstrative pronouns. So we'll begin by reminding ourselves of what a demonstrative pronoun is. Then we'll move on to the various Greek forms of the demonstrative pronouns. Thereafter, we will look at various translation principles regarding how to translate this type of pronoun. Thereafter, I'll introduce you to your new vocabulary for lesson 10. And then we'll spend a considerable amount of time doing some translation practice today, which I hope will be beneficial to you. So if you're ready, let's get going. Let's begin this lesson by answering the question, what are demonstrative pronouns? So the Latin term demonstro means I point out. So very simply put, demonstrative pronoun is the pointing out noun, the pointing out pronoun, should I say. So for example, if we were speaking about a book, we could say book or a book. If we were to speak about it by using the indefinite article, then we would be speaking about a book in a very generic way. In other words, a very general way. It could be any type of book that we were referring to. Or we could say the book. By putting the definite article in the front, we are making the book more definite, but it's still not very well defined. To make it well defined and to point out a specific book, we would use a demonstrative pronoun. As you can see here with the third example, we could say this book or that book, and by doing that, we make it definite and well defined. In other words, we are pointing out a specific book that is unique or different from any other book that we are speaking about. So in English, demonstrative pronouns fall into two types of categories. We have the near and far pronouns. So let's speak about each one individually. Firstly, the near pronouns are this and these. And why are they near pronouns? Because they refer to people or things that are near spatially or conceptually to the speaker. So if you have a look here on the right hand side, we have 4 pictures. The first 2 pictures over here illustrate the near pronouns. In the first picture, the individual apple is near to the speaker, and so we use the demonstrative pronoun this, and we say this is an apple. In the second picture, we have a group of apples that are near to the speaker, and so we refer to them as these are apples. And then let's move on to the far pronouns. Far pronouns are that and those. Why are they called far pronouns? Because far pronouns refer to people or things that are distant from the speaker. So let's return to our pictures on the right hand side here, and now we will use frame 3 and frame 4. So in picture 3, we have an individual apple that is far away from the speaker, and so we refer to it as that is an apple. And then in our fourth picture, we have a group of apples that is far away from the speaker, and so we use the demonstrative pronoun those are apples. All right, so 2 categories, near and far, and within those 2 categories we have 4 specific demonstrative pronouns: this, these, that, and those. Let us take some time just to quickly practice the near and far demonstrative pronouns. So here we have 4 boxes, so let me label them. Here's box 1, box 2, 3, and 4. So the question is, how are we going to point out these specific boxes using the near and far pronouns? Okay, so the first one, we have an individual box that is near to the speaker. All right, so we refer to it as this box. In the second example, we have an individual box that is far away from the speaker. So we refer to this as that box. In the third example, we have a group of boxes that are near to the speaker, and so we refer to it as these boxes. And then in the fourth example, we have two boxes that are far away from the speaker, and so we use the demonstrative pronoun those boxes. Okay, so I hope that is making sense to you if you weren't familiar with the demonstrative pronouns. Now that we have also done a refresher course regarding the English demonstrative pronouns, let's now move on to the Greek demonstrative pronouns. Let us now transition from the English to the Greek equivalents. And the first Greek demonstrative pronoun that we're going to look at is hutos. So let me provide you with some helpful observations for learning this first Greek demonstrative pronoun. The first one is the endings are identical to the third person personal pronoun endings, and I will do some revision with you shortly. Number 2, each form except the masculine and feminine nominatives begin with a tau. And then further, the masculine and feminine nominative forms begin with a rough breathing mark instead. So there's an example. We have hautos, which is the third person pronoun, whereas hutos is the demonstrative pronoun. So you can see there that hutos has a rough breathing mark. And then the third helpful observation is the first omicron changes to an alpha whenever the alpha or eta occurs in the ending. All right, so keep these observations in mind as we learn the forms of hutos together. So because the demonstrative pronoun hutos has identical endings to the third person personal pronoun, let's quickly do some revision together, starting with the masculine genders. So let me say these for you. The singular forms, we have autos, autou, auto, auton. The plural forms, autoi, auton, autois, autus. And then the feminine genders, the singulars, we have aute, autes, aute, autain. The plural forms, autai, auton, autes, autas. And then the neuter genders, the singular forms, we have auta, autu, auto, and auta. And the plural forms are auta, auton, autois, and auta. Alright, so now that you have been reminded of the third person personal pronoun, let's take a look at the forms of hutos together. So let's take a look at the demonstrative pronoun hutos. Remember that this is the near pronoun. So the singular forms we're going to translate with this, and the plural forms we're going to translate with these as the English equivalents. Also remember that the nominative singular and plural of the masculine and feminine genders are unique. In other words, they have a rough breathing mark and they don't begin with a tau. So let's start with those. The masculine nominative, we have hutos, and the plural hutoi, each with a rough breathing mark and no tau. And then the feminine gender, we have how te, and the plural, how tai, also with a rough breathing mark and no tau. All the other forms of the other cases begin with a tau. And then also remember that the first Omicron changes to an alpha whenever an alpha or eta occurs in the ending. And I will point that out to you when we see those changes taking place. So let's begin with the masculine gender forms of hutos. The nominative, as I've already said, is hutos. The genitive is tutu. The dative is tuto. And the accusative is tuton. The plural forms, the nominative is hutoi. The genitive is tuton. Dative, tutois. Accusative, tutus. Let us now take a look at the feminine gender forms of hutos. The nominative, as I've already stated, is haute. The genitive is tautes. The dative is taute. And the accusative is tautain. So you will notice here that there's a few changes. So the Omicron has disappeared, and now we have an alpha after the tau. And why is that? It's because we have eta in the endings. All right, so that is one of the helpful observations that I want you to take notice of. Then the plural forms, the nominative is hautai, genitive, tuton, dative, tautes, and accusative, tautes. All right, so there you will see the genitive plural has the Omicron in it, which is irregular in the feminine gender because the consistent letter there is the alpha. And in this case, the reason is because we have alpha in the endings. And let's move on to the final gender, the neuter forms of hutos. The nominative is tuta. The genitive, tutu. Dative, tuto. Accusative, tuta. And then the plural forms, the nominative is tauta. Genitive, tuton. Dative, tutois. And accusative is tauta. All right, so the neuter gender is quite tricky, but as long as you keep in mind the ending, if it is a alpha or an eta, you're going to have the Omicron changing to an alpha. Otherwise, it should be quite straightforward to learn. Let us now take a look at the second Greek demonstrative pronoun, which is ekainos, and this is our far pronoun. So the singular forms we're going to translate with that, and the plural forms we're going to translate with those as the English equivalents. Now, ekainos has the same endings as hutos. The only big difference is the stem is quite different. So we have ekain as the stem. Let me just underline those for you in the masculine genders. All right, so ekain is the consistent stem in all the genders actually, and the endings are the same as hutos. All right, so just quickly go through these together. The masculine gender first. The singular forms, we have ekainos, ekainu, ekaino, ekainon, and the plural forms ekainoi, ekainon, ekainois, and ekainus. Let's go through the feminine genders together. The singular forms, we have ekainei, ekainais, ekainei, and ekainain. And the plural forms ekainai, ekainon, ekainais, and ekainas. And then the neuter genders, the singular forms are ekaina, ekainu, ekaino, ekaina. And the plural forms ekaina, ekainon, ekainois, and ekaina. Alright, so remember that the stem stays the same and the endings are the same as hutos. So now that you are familiar with the two Greek demonstrative pronouns, hutos and akainos, as well as their different forms, let's now speak about some important translation principles. So the first principle that I want to teach you is that hutos and akainos must agree in gender, number, and case with a noun they modify. The second principle is that demonstrative pronouns usually stand in the predicate position to the nouns that they are modifying. And then the third principle, if the demonstrative pronoun modifies is articular, in other words, it has an article in front of it, then when it comes to our English translation, the article is not translated. So let's take a look at two examples. The first one, we have haute, hei graphe, and the second pattern is hei graphe haute. Right, so in both these examples, we see that the demonstrative pronoun haute agrees in gender, number, and case with the noun that it's modifying, which is graphe, which means scripture. In both patterns, they're standing in the predicate position. So how would we translate that Greek text? We would translate it as this scripture. All right, not that the scripture. All right, so we don't need to include the in our English translation. And then the second example, we have akainos ha nomos or ha nomos akainos. All right, so there we have the demonstrative pronoun akainos, which also agrees in gender, number, and case with the noun that it's modifying, which is nomos, and it's standing in the predicate position. So how do we translate this? We translate it as that law. All right, so we don't need to include the article the once again. All right, the next very important translation principle is that many times hutos and akainos are used substantively. All right, that's when a word functions as a noun. So in such instances, a word is supplied according to gender and number. So just take a look at three examples together. The first example, we have hutos estin ha Christos. All right, so we translate this as this man is the Christ. So you would notice there in the Greek text that we don't have a word for man. Right, so where do we get man from? Well, we can see that hutos, the gender is masculine and it's singular. All right, it's functioning substantively as a noun, and so we take the liberty to supply man in the English. So therefore we have this man is the Christ. And the second example, we have legei ekene, which we translate as he is saying to that woman. Right, so once again, there is no Greek equivalent of woman in the text. So where do we get woman from? Well, we can see that ekene is a feminine gender and it's singular, and so we supply the English woman because it's functioning substantively. And then the final example, we have lelese tauta humin, and we translate this as he will speak these things to you. All right, so we there use the English word things because tauta has a neuter gender and it's also plural. Right, so this is quite common in the Greek New Testament where these demonstrative pronouns function as substantives. I'd like now to speak about demonstrative pronouns and their antecedents. So the first point here is we have learned that when studying pronouns, we should look for the antecedent. All right, so if you need a refresher, please return to lesson 8 and watch that lesson again. But just for time's sake, let's remind ourselves of the definition of antecedent. The antecedent is the noun to which the pronoun refers. Right, so the antecedent is the noun to which the pronoun refers. And the antecedent can come after or before the demonstrative pronoun in the Greek New Testament. So let's look at an example of each one of these cases. So the first example of the relationship of the demonstrative pronoun to its antecedent is the example of the antecedent coming after the demonstrative pronoun, i.e. forward in the text. So our example comes from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verse 3, and we're just going to focus on the first part of this verse as it relates to our discussion. So there Paul the author writes, Tuta gar estin thelema tu theu. So we translate this in English as for this is the will of God. So just two things that I want to bring to your attention. Firstly, notice that tuta agrees in gender and number with its antecedent, which is specifically thelema, which is will, but we can include there tu theu, so it's the will of God. And then the second thing is notice how the demonstrative pronoun, this, points the reader to its antecedent, all right, which is forward in the text. So let's now take a look at an example of when the antecedent comes before the demonstrative pronoun. So here is an example of the antecedent coming before the demonstrative pronoun, i.e. behind in the text. And the example that I'd like to use is John 20, verses 30 to 31. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the entire text. Just like to read the first portion of verse 31, where John writes, Tauta de gegraptai hina pestusete hoti Iesus estin ha Christos ha huios tu theu kai hina pestuantes zoein ekete en to onomatai autu. Alright, so we translate that verse 31 as, but these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. Alright, now regarding our discussion, what is the specific antecedent that John is referring us back to? Well, I've just made a note there that there is much discussion among scholars as to what the antecedent of tauta could be. And I'll leave that for you to mull over and to decide regarding what the answer could be. Let's take a look at our vocabulary for lesson 10. The first word is apathenesko, which means I die. Then we have ekenos, ekene, ekena. Alright, so there we have the demonstrative pronoun, and we have the three genders, the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter, which we translate as that in the singular and those in the plural. The third word, we have exousia, hey, which is power or authority. Our next word is epangelia, hey, epangelia hei, promise. Next we have euangelion ta, which is gospel. Then we have thanatos ha, which means death. Next we have kreno, which means I judge. Then we have meno, translated as I remain. Then we have hote, with a rough breathing mark, so we pronounce it with an H, and that's translated as when. Then we have our other demonstrative pronoun, hutos, haute, and tuta. So it gives us the masculine, feminine, and neuter nominative singular forms, which we translate as this and these in the plural. Next we have pos, which is how, asking the question. Next we have sun, which is a preposition with, and it takes its object in the dative case. All right, so pay attention to the case in which the object is found. Second to last, we have sozo, which is the verb I save. And then finally, we have hora hei, which is hour. So what I'd like to do today, because we have a little bit of extra time on our hands, is do the parsing and the translation separately. So in this slide, I'll go through the parsing information of each word with you, and then in the next slide, we'll look at the translation and make some observations regarding the text. So the Greek text reads, sose ha dekaios kurios ekenon ton mathetein apa tutu tu cosmu tu paneru. Alright, so let's look at our parsing sheet together. We have the first word, sose, which is a verb. It's in the future tense, active, indicative, third person singular. And our vocab there, I've given you the English instead today. It means save. Then we have ha, which is an article. It's in the nominative case, masculine gender, singular person, and it's the. Then we have dekaios, which is an adjective, also in the nominative case, masculine singular, and that means righteous. Then we have kurios, which is a noun, nominative masculine singular, which we translate as Lord. All right, then we have our first demonstrative pronoun, which is ekenon. It's in the accusative case, masculine singular. Because it's singular, we translate it with that. And then we have ton. It's an article, accusative masculine singular, which is the. Then we have mathetein, which is a noun, accusative masculine singular, which means disciple. Then we have apa, which is our preposition, and it takes its object in the genitive case. That's why we translated with the English from. Right, then we have our second demonstrative pronoun, which is tutu. It's in the genitive case, masculine singular. Because it's singular, we translate it with this. Then we have tu, which is an article, genitive masculine singular, translated as the. Then we have cosmu, which is a noun, also genitive masculine singular, which we translate as the world. And then tu, article, genitive masculine singular, translated as of the. And then paneru, which is also an adjective, genitive masculine singular, which we translate as evil. Right, so now that we have all our parsing information completed, in the next slide, let's do our translation and make some observations regarding this text. So putting all our information together from our parsing sheet, we end up with this translation. The righteous Lord will save that disciple from this world of evil, or alternatively, or this evil world. Right, so the first thing that I want to speak about are the demonstrative pronouns. So the first demonstrative pronoun is a kainon, and the second one is tutu. All right, so let's look at a kainon. Let's ask ourselves, what is the antecedent for a kainon? All right, well, the answer is it's mathetain. And why is that? It's because mathetain and a kainon agree in gender, number, and case. And if you look closely here, you will see that mathetain has a feminine ending and a kainon is masculine. But we look at the article is masculine. All right, so this is one of those upside down nouns. All right, so this is a masculine first declension noun. All right, so there is agreement there because a kainon is masculine and ton is masculine, therefore the actual noun mathetain is also masculine. So there's agreement there. So we translate this as not the disciple, but that disciple. And then our second demonstrative pronoun is tutu, which comes from hutos. And you need to ask ourselves, what is the antecedent? All right, well, the antecedent is kosmu. And once again, we have agreement there between the demonstrative pronoun and the antecedent in gender, number, and case. And this time we translate tutu as this. All right, so those are some observations regarding the demonstrative pronouns that we've spoken about in this lesson. I'd also want to take the opportunity now to speak about a few other things. And the first thing being is the adjectives. So there's two adjectives in this text. The first one is dikaios, and the second one is paneiru. So let's look at dikaios. So dikaios there is in the nominative case. All right, so it's modifying kurios, which is Lord. So we translate it as the righteous Lord. And the reason for that is because dikaios is standing in the attributive position. How do we know that? And the reason for that is because the article precedes it. All right, so standing in the attributive position, and therefore it's modifying the Lord. So it's not just the Lord, but it's the righteous Lord. And then our second adjective is paneiru, which means evil. And there, as you can see, it's also standing in the attributive position. The article, however, comes in front of the noun as well as the adjective, right? So it also stands in the attributive position. So paneiru is modifying kosmu. So we can translate this as the world of evil, or perhaps better, evil world, right? Because of the attributive position that it's standing in. Maybe one or two observations now regarding a few finer details of this verse. So let's look at our preposition here, which is upper. And upper takes its object in the genitive case, right? And that is why we have two kosmu, two paneiru, as well as the demonstrative pronoun tutu, all in the genitive case. All right, and that you need to just pay attention to. All right, so Greek has certain rules and it doesn't break those rules. Good. Well, let's now move on to our final translation for this lesson. So a second example reads as follows: Ekenos sozetai upper thanatu hoti lambane ton namon ton auton en te cardia autu. So let's do our passing sheet together. We have a kainos, which is our demonstrative pronoun. It's in the nominative case, masculine, singular, and we are going to translate it as that. Then we have our first verb, sozetai. It's a future, middle passive indicative, third person singular. The vocab is save. Then we have upper, our preposition again, takes its case in the object in the genitive case, and we translate it therefore as from. Then we have thanatu, which is our object of our preposition. It's therefore in the genitive case, masculine singular, and it means death. Then we have hoti, which is our conjunction. And from our vocab, we know that it means because. Then we have our second verb, lambane. It's present tense, active, indicative, third person singular, which means receive. Then we have ton, our article. It's in the accusative case, masculine gender, singular person, means the. Then we have nomon. It's our noun, accusative, masculine singular, which means law. We have ton again. Then we have auton. And there we have a third person personal pronoun. It's in the accusative case, masculine gender, singular person. And there we know that our vocab tells us that this means him, but we're going to translate it as same, and I'll explain the reason in the next slide. Then we have en, another preposition. It takes its object in the dative case, so that's why we translate it with in. Then we have te, another article, dative feminine singular, which means the. Remember that the article always agrees with the noun that it's modifying in gender, number, and case. That's why cardia, which more technically is the object of the preposition, is also dative feminine singular, and that means heart. And then finally we have autu, which is another third person personal pronoun. The genitive case, masculine gender, singular, and we translate it as his. So let's put this information together and do our translation in the next slide. So our translation should read as follows. That man will be saved from death because he is receiving the same law in his heart. All right, let's make a few observations regarding a few things. The first thing we can look at is the demonstrative pronoun ekainos. All right, if you remember, the demonstrative pronoun normally functions substantively as a noun. Therefore, we need to supply the gender and number when translating it. Right, so that is why we translate it as that man, because it's masculine singular. Right, let's move on to speaking about a few other things in this verse. The next thing I want to point your attention to is the verb sozetai. You'll notice there that you have a zeta. Right, what has happened there? Well, that is the sign of amalgamation that has taken place there. Then we have our preposition upper, which takes its object in the genitive case, and that is why thanetu is in the genitive case. Then, very importantly, let's speak about the translation of the third person personal pronoun auton. All right, so we know from our vocab that we normally translate auton simply as him. All right, if it is masculine, which it is. All right, but in this instance, we've translated it as the same. So what is the reason for that? Well, if you have a look very closely, this is an example of the third person personal pronoun functioning intensively because it's standing in the attributive position. So you can see there that the article ton comes before the noun nomon, and the article comes before auton. So if you can't remember the details of this translation principle, then please return to lesson 8 to refresh your memory. And I think that is all for today. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.